agent contracts. We're now joined by David Ubben, Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, and David Smoak. David, thank you very much for your time. I love what you guys did before in the 3-Star U article, and then now the follow-up on who cultivates or develops talent. This seems like it probably had to take you quite some time.
I initially pitched this idea as something to do over the summer in June as like a project. And then we realized we should definitely do it before the draft. And then I started calculating about 4 teams, and it took me like a day. And I was like, I got to get some help. So I enlisted Mitch Light and Ari Wasserman to come help tabulate the data. And I think our final tabulation was like 40 man hours on just calculating the data alone. So it took a while.
David, what school surprised you the most with their development? I know the ones that didn't develop are kind of, if you look at the record, not surprising, but there's a couple of like dark horses in there that really surprised me as what they're doing.
Yeah, I think Miami on the positive side was really surprising, and then I think Stanford capturing our 5-Star U title was really surprising, and then on the other end of the spectrum, Northwestern really not producing much NFL talent, but also having an ability to win at a higher rate than people expected. And then, of course, Baylor doing what they did over the course of 3 coaching staffs. Most of the time when we looked at, who struggled to develop, the lack of continuity was a huge reason why. I mean, you look at Tennessee, Texas, Nebraska, lack of continuity, lack of development. Baylor obviously had coaching changes for different reasons, but, for them to be able to do that with 3 different staffs was pretty, unbelievable.
Tennessee and Oregon were the ones that were the least, right, at the bottom, based on who they recruit. And you had mentioned Texas was right outside that list.
Yeah. I think when you look at, development at all 3-star levels, Tennessee was clearly sort of the anti-development U. Texas and Oklahoma really struggled with 5 stars and sort of pulled the Big 12 as a whole development number down with 5 stars. Texas, of course, really at all star levels, not exactly breaking news to everyone that they have not sort of played up to their talent level. So some not surprises and then some surprises. And I think when we looked at it at a conference level, the ACC being better at developing than SEC was very surprising.
David, one of the things that jumped out at me was that A&M is excellent at when they get a 5-star player, that guy's getting developed. They're like 8 of 12 or whatever it was. When they get a 4-star player, that guy is probably going to have to focus on his schooling.
Yeah, it was interesting to see the schools that had, very different numbers across star levels, and that's kind of hard to explain. I mean, A&M was sort of number one on that list of, why are you so good with 5 stars and struggle so much with 4 stars? I don't have a good answer for that. That was the thing is this raw data will tell you quite a bit, but still leaves some unanswered questions, and that's one of the big ones for us.
Again, David Ubben, theathletic.com with us on 365 Sports. There was a time, David, back in the day, I always enjoyed the Dallas Morning News used to do something that was similar but not nearly as in-depth. They'd take their top whatever they had, top 100 or whatever, and then look 4 years or 5 years later. Is this something that is just deeper and more more expansive than kind of what that project was?
I suppose somewhat. I think one thing that we noted, too, is that this isn't something we can do and update annually. I think this is the last year, maybe even a year too late that you could really do this, because with the transfer portal, you get into sort of complicated conversations about who should deserve credit. And for most of the time that we look, transfers are pretty rare. And of course, you sit out a year, and guys that were established somewhere else transferred and played at a new place and thrived were pretty rare. But that's going to be really common now. So I don't know that this data moving forward will tell you that much, but I think it does serve as a pretty representative snapshot of what the last 11 years in college football have looked like in terms of development.
So what's the new metric that you guys have to figure out to see how you are?
You'd have to fold in like transfer portal and, figuring out who thrives the most with portal would be interesting. I don't know how you would, derive that. I think for us, you have two pretty clear data points. You can say, well, what about guys that go undrafted and have careers? And what about the 2 stars? And sure, there's lots of what ifs. But generally, what's your recruiting ranking? Did you get drafted? Are two pretty binary data points that will tell you something. And in big swaths of data will be pretty representative. And I think the data sort of suss that out for us.
Baylor, you underneath the 3 stars, they hit 7.6%, 36th overall. 4 stars you mentioned at the very top, nearly 38%, and then they've only had three 5 stars in the time you mentioned, 11 years, 33.5%, 1 out of every 5. But you said took home our title of 4-star U, but were mostly average elsewhere. I would have thought, just based on following them since 2010, that they would have been pretty good on 3 stars or less, but I guess not.
Yeah, I think that was one of the interesting things about this project is it sort of challenges the things that you think. When you ask about, who's the best at developing, underrated players? People would talk about, Iowa would show up or Utah would show up and all these things. And what you think was different than what the data shows. I think that was interesting because you can write about things and have opinions, but this is, data that we haven't really seen before. And I think it confirms some things that people believe, and I think it challenges a lot of others.
So, David, back to the, maybe off the column a little bit, but related, but the transfer portal and the way that it has the windows now. What are your thoughts on some of the guys that jumped in these last couple weeks and how that's going to shake things up going into the offseason?
Well, I think the one thing moving forward in the portal era that we know is that December is when the big-time talents are going to be in there, and you might get some in April. But largely, most of the guys in April are going to be guys that lost competitions in the spring, don't really know what their future is. The guys that have thrived and are looking to move up and find a better spot, those are the guys that most of the time are entering in December, and many of whom enter the portal knowing very well where they're going. So I think that's sort of my main takeaway is that if you're looking to sort of plug and play somebody and you're shopping in the portal in April, good luck.
Do you think that Hugh Freeze has a particular grocery item in mind with the news about TJ Finley, perhaps already on campus, but what do you make of the Auburn situation? I know that wasn't a shocking move by any means, but now that it's official, your thoughts on that?
Well, grad transfers can enter whenever, so maybe there's another quarterback on the market. But when you look at the best quarterbacks on the market, Peyton Thorne from Michigan State, guy who's got some experience but seemed to lose his job at Michigan State this spring. Obviously, Casey Thompson, similar situation at Nebraska. So again, it's kind of what are you getting? Is it an upgrade for you? That's up to the coaches to decide, and it's a results business, so we'll see if it is or not. But there's not a Devin Leary, there's not a Cam Newton out there on the market. So you got to sort of figure out, is there somebody that makes us better? And I think the list of guys that do that anywhere is pretty short right now in the portal. You talk to personnel people, you talk to coaches, and they say, it's kind of slim pickings in the portal, which is bad news for the 1,000 or so guys that are sitting in there, waiting on the phone.
David, I think the perception is the portal helps the rich get richer, but then there are players who leave the elite schools are going to go down the ladder, or in some cases even might be in the group of 5 or even below that. It depends. Who do you think, or does the transfer portal benefit basically everybody if they work it right?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think we haven't seen enough data, really. I think, last year you look at Alabama, right, and you say, well, they whiffed on some guys. Receivers didn't really work out. Jermaine Burton didn't really add much for them. A guy, that came over from Georgia. They added another receiver from Louisville that kind of got hurt and didn't really contribute much. They had a left tackle from Vanderbilt, Palestine, and he was okay, but not really a world beater. And if you're, mining Vanderbilt, late in the portal season, you're probably, not in the best spot. But then you look at Georgia, obviously, and last year they win the national championship, but they look at their roster and they say, our receivers are not great. They go take Mississippi State's best receiver and Missouri's best receiver and clearly upgrade. and makes life a little bit easier for Carson Beck as a first-year starter. So, I mean, I think in general, yes, I think it probably helps the rich get richer. But if you have a staff that's really good at evaluating and has good relationships, and, you know, if you're at a place, you know, that's in a talent-rich area, and maybe guys go to Ohio State or go to Georgia and it doesn't work out for them or they don't love it there and they come back closer to home. You know, most of the time when they transfer, they do come back closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
You can make that portal work for you. So I don't think that there's sort of a generalized, oh, the portal's better for this program and this program and this program. You know, I think in general it's a place because, you know, I compare it to speed dating and recruiting. You don't have 3 years to evaluate and get to know a guy. You might see some tape. You might, you know, get on a call, bring a guy out for a visit. Most of the time, you got like a week to figure out, you know, is this the guy that we want? And if you can, you know, give a good eval off the field, on the field, and recruit, you know, heavy, and do that in a very accelerated time frame, you're going to thrive.
The tampering part of it, how much do you think is going on?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot is the best way to put that. Some more effective than others, but, you know, I think the coaches that have complained about it, and, you know, it's a complaint for everybody because they got to re-recruit their roster. You know, the NCAA has basically said, you guys are kind of on your own on this. You know, they'd love for it to stop, but it's not going to. And I think ultimately, unless you make players employees and they're under contract, and, you know, that's the thing, you can get mad about tampering, but, like, it's technically not illegal. It's just sort of frowned upon. Like, and what is tampering really? You know, if a high school coach gets a call from a coach at another school, like, how many degrees of separation do you have? Most of the time when you talk about tampering, it's not a position coach from, you know, X school calling a player from Y school and saying, hey, I'd love for you. That's usually not how it works. So, like, for one, you can't really penalize that, and the NCAA is not very interested in penalizing that. And what exactly, you know, it is not really easy to define.
David Ubben, The Athletic, the Pac-12, I'll get to that in just a second. Craig, you got another short question?
Yeah, David, we were just talking about the new playoff format a few minutes ago. We've known this is coming. We've all talked about it and fantasized about what it would look like. But now to kind of see it in front of us in black and white and know the dates and know the sites and all of that, are you somebody that was pro-expansion, anti-expansion? Where do you sit on the future of the postseason in college football?
I mean, I think the postseason, I think it'll be fine. I don't think it's that much of a game changer. I think ultimately the postseason is going to be very, very fun. I think, you know, the effects that it has on the regular season remains to be seen. I think in general, because there's so few games, you know, you're still always going to have a very heated regular season. How much air does it take out of the regular season? We'll see. Probably a little bit. You know, enough to really hurt the sport? I don't know, because now you've got a lot more games that are relevant to the postseason. And once we get into the postseason, I mean, those games are going to be absolute fire. So I was like kind of tentatively pro expansion. I thought the sport would be fine without it, but I think it'll be in good shape with it. So I really, you know, not to disappoint, I didn't really have a super hot take about what the sport should do about the postseason.
David, what do you think is ever going to happen with the media deal in the Pac-12?
Well, yeah, two different people, you get two different answers. And generally, the people on the eastern side of this debate seem to think that the Pac-12 is, you know, not long for this world. And you ask people out west, and they seem to think, oh, we'll be fine. The deal's going to be great. It's just a matter of time. So at some point, you know, the ink's got to hit paper, and, you know, it's hard to know. You know, you ask different people, you see different things, and, you know, it's not going great. Anytime you have a delay, or you have all this chatter that it's not going to be good, and, you know, networks get involved, and you start talking about Apple Plus, and that gets a little bit in a weird spot. So I'm not, you know, waiting on something that's going to knock people's socks off, but is it something that precipitates the, you know, the splintering of the Pac-12? You know, we'll see. You know, you want to do that for the difference of $2 to $5 million a year? I don't think so. But if it's $10 to $15 million a year, then you might have an interesting conversation. So we'll see.
Which among the 12 or 14 teams in the Big 12 with 4 incoming teams, who would you say is a lock, if there is one, if you had to put one name out there in the Big 12 to win this year's Big 12 football championship?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think the beauty of the Big 12 as it currently, you know, sits is there's not going to be one, especially with the way that Oklahoma looks. I mean, I think I'd probably lean Texas, but not, in a big way. And certainly we've seen Texas underwhelm quite a bit. I mean, I think Baylor will be in the mix for sure. TCU will probably be in the mix. I like, Kansas State's got decent odds as well. So probably that quartet, but I think it's going to be a tight race. But, I sort of, when the rubber meets the road, I guess I would probably say Texas.
David, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Great stuff with what you guys did, with what you wrote a couple of weeks ago, and also how you followed it up. We appreciate it post-NFL draft. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.
That's David Ubben, theathletic.com, with us on 365 Sports.
Yeah.